Okay, so good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for our webinar, The Power of No, Driving Compliance and Confidence in R&D Tax Claims. This is our first webinar of the year, so many more to come, so do keep an eye out for that on our events page. My name's Suze, I'm Commercial Manager here at WhisperClaims, and I'm delighted to be hosting today's session alongside my colleague, Jen Badger, who is our Managing Director, co-founder here at WhisperClaims, and also our R&D Tax in-house expert. Hey, Jen.
Hey, Suze.
Okay, so in today's landscape where HMRC scrutiny remains high and the complexities of the R&D tax scheme continue to evolve, making the right decisions about whether or not to submit a claim on behalf of your client has really never been more critical. With the risk of an ill-judged yes potentially leading to time, money and resources being spent on an inquiry, losing a client potentially if there's an inquiry and even penalties, we want to explore today why a well-informed no isn't a negative. It's actually a safeguard for you and for your client. So on that basis, what's the best way to identify an ineligible claim, and how best can you demonstrate why a claim doesn't meet HMRC's criteria to your clients? How do you convey this perhaps disappointing information to them appropriately? So the session today will be kind of a fireside chat format where we'll be discussing how the right tools, the right processes and the right mindset can help you prioritise compliance without compromising on these opportunities, all whilst being able to reassure your client that they can trust your advice. Because the last thing you want is your client seeking services elsewhere, submitting an ineligible claim through another provider, and then for you as their accountant inevitably to be picking up the pieces should an inquiry be opened. Now, we know that there's a mix of both existing customers, hi everyone, and those who may be new to WhisperClaims in the audience today. So whether you're already using our software, whether you're simply here for the discussion, or you're possibly exploring how we might fit into your practice, this session will have something for everyone. And on that note, before we dive in, let me give you a quick introduction as to who we are for those of you who may not know. WhisperClaims is more than just an R&D tax software platform. Through a combination of our innovative and intuitive software and expert advice line support, we're empowering UK accountants to navigate HMRC's R&D tax scheme with clarity and confidence, boosting efficiency, reducing risk and optimizing in-house processes. We'll be spotlighting a couple of our features within the app a bit later on, but don't worry, we're not doing a full demo today. If anybody does want a demo, please do get in touch after the session and I'll be really happy to organise that for you. We do want this session to be interactive during the Q&A, so please use the Q&A box in the ribbon at the bottom of your screen for any questions that you may have. If you want to share thoughts, feel free to use the chat box and we'll get to those as they come through. And so without further ado, let's get started. So Jen, it would be great if you could kick us off with, I guess what the most important question of this webinar is today is, what has inspired our concept of the power of no when it comes to R&D tax claims?
Yes, this is a kind of a multi-factor thing that goes right back to the beginning of WhisperClaims and why we set up in the first place and what we were thinking. WhisperClaims was set up so that advisors could, we had a very no claim left behind kind of philosophy. We wanted to make sure that we could make it economically viable to prepare all claims. But the flip side of that is you need to make sure that nobody wastes any time. So a huge part of this actually initially was the driver to make sure that no one ever answered a question they didn't have to answer. So our whole software was built around what the things you need to know at the beginning. So fundamentally, like one of the first questions we ask is the company subject to UK corporation tax? If you say no to that question, then obviously they can't claim R&D tax relief, and we don't want you to go through and fill out every single question. So obviously the driver there was around convenience for our customers and making sure the app was as usable as possible. But I think it evolved from there through thinking about actually the kind of ethics of this industry. And we know that obviously with everything that's happened in the last couple of years, it's shown up really how a lot of people have been pushing the boundaries for a long time. One of the things Susan and I were talking about when we were preparing this webinar is around, I don't think you could point to any R&D consultancy that's been in existence since the beginning of this that hasn't put in a claim that they were a little bit like, I'm not sure if this is fully eligible. So there's always been that boundary pushing. There's always been what we've always said is in the very early days, and actually up till very recently, anyone operating in the sector was operating in a bit of a vacuum. There's been a very little, the low level of compliance work done by HMRC, the low level of compliance checks done means that even the most ethical advisors are going, well, this seemed acceptable for these claims, so I'm going to keep doing that thing regardless, because there's no feedback from HMRC. There's no, that doesn't fit. No, this isn't what you should be doing. So what we wanted to do is make sure that people were kind of brought back in a wee bit, that the rules were there as a very kind of direct thing. So, for example, one of the questions we ask is, what competent professional did you use in the claim? If you say, no, we didn't use any competent professionals, there's no one there that was competent in software development, we're bakers, we don't know anything about software development, then the app would stop you. Because even if the work that's been done was eligible, one of the really important criteria is that you've got competent professionals. You can't continue with a claim, even if the work itself might seem eligible. You might have advances, you might have uncertainties, but you're missing part of it. So it's giving people boundaries, it's giving them a framework, because saying no is important in this, we'll get into more. And obviously what we get from other people is, well, that doesn't make a huge lot of business sense to actually put people off claiming. And obviously, no, if you're going from a purely numbers point of view, it's best for us if all claims go through. We don't care about eligibility. We don't care about anything to do with that. And we just take everyone's money. But that's not who we are as a company. And it's not what we want for the sector. We want the sector to be improving, to be getting better, people to be learning what the limits are, what the boundaries are, what the rules are of the scheme, and really helping them enforce that with their clients. And obviously, a huge part of that is the reputational risk that we face for ourselves and for our clients. We want to make sure that, first of all, HMRC aren't looking at every single claim prepared by WhisperClaims, which, just to be clear, has never happened. But obviously, if we were allowing people to put through any old claim with no advances, no competent professionals, then that would attract the attention of HMRC at some point. And also there's the reputational risk to our clients, where if we're not helping them stay on the straight and narrow, they could potentially also be paid more attention to by HMRC than they really want. And that really harms their reputation with their clients. So from our point of view, doing things ethically, doing things correctly, staying within the boundaries is so important. And that's where being able to say no is incredibly important. Just saying yes every time is just going to cause damage to everyone involved.
It's fair to say, isn't it, Jen, that this not stopping people progressing, but if you hit a blocker or you hit a point in the app where it is a no, that whole ethos has been baked into the software right from the get-go. This isn't a response to the current climate and a response to the things that have been happening in the last 2 years. This has always been our standpoint, and we are huge advocates and champions of, using the spirit of the scheme as it's intended. And that's really,
and absolutely. It's also, I mean, talking about the kind of business sense of it, it's also, we don't want, again, protecting our reputation, our standing in the market. We don't ever want to take someone's money for them to find out downstream that this isn't an eligible claim for one reason or another. So there's a huge amount in it. But yeah, the philosophy from the beginning for us was, nobody does a claim if they shouldn't be making that claim for whatever reason. So we don't want to take their money. We don't want to risk their reputation with the client. We don't want to risk our reputation with our clients. So yeah, it's been something that from day one, it was, what points at which would we stop someone preparing a claim? What are the questions we need to ask as early as possible to make sure that they should be continuing in the first place?
And giving our customers a way of being able to really transparently demonstrate to them why it's a no, why rather than just turning around to your client and saying, sorry, there's nothing here. We want to help them be able to convey that information really clearly, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we would hate to do is just have, for example, have someone answer every single question about a claim and then just be like, oh yeah, this one isn't eligible. You work out why. So it is important. It's part of our kind of philosophy of support and education, isn't it? Around, if you let every single claim through, no one's learning anything, like we know from HMRC and working that is trying to take away that vacuum, that lack of feedback. I mean, every question we ask in the app has feedback. Everything, if it tells you that it's a no, if it tells you this is an eligible claim, you get that feedback. And that's something that's really important to us, is building in that feedback, that the education that you can get through. Learning a claim isn't eligible is as valuable as putting together an eligible claim, if you know why it's not eligible and you know not to do that in the future.
Very good. Right. Well, on that note, then, in your experience, what are the most common, I guess, risks that advisors face when submitting these sort of potentially borderline or ineligible claims, when they're just maybe not aware that these claims haven't hit the criteria?
So obviously the key risk, and this is speaking right now, is that HMRC will come along and ask questions. So at the moment, as things stand right now, is about 20% of claims are compliance checks are open done. That obviously is a massive increase from about 1% I think that figure comes from 2020, 2021. So it's gone from 1% up to 20%. So obviously the risk of a compliance check is much, much higher now. So that's a huge risk. And anyone that's done any claims in the last few years knows that HMRC is not, it's not open to letting many claims through once they open a compliance check. So it's not, obviously 10 years ago, your chance of getting a compliance check was really low. I would say about 1%. And almost all of those would then, after some negotiation, maybe some reduction in the costs, would go through. And that is not the state now. So it's a huge risk that HMRC will notice. There's a lot more transparency now with the additional information form. So you can't also hide by not submitting supporting documentation. You have to do that. So you have to give HMRC that information. So there's a huge difference now. And the risk, obviously, of compliance check is much higher. There's also the risk of allowing yourself to be pushed. So what we see a lot, and did see more, less recently, but more in the sort of 2-3 years ago, was I'm not sure this claim is eligible, but my client really wants to claim. And that is a really big risk, because then you're not advising your client. You're not doing your due diligence. You're not actually being a good advisor if you allow them to go ahead with the claim. And obviously, if you can't articulate what the risk is and why, yes, your client will go to someone else. They'll go to one of the less scrupulous advisors, shall we say, in the marketplace, and they might put a claim in anyway, and it might go through. So without that kind of ability to say no in an educated way, you risk your reputation if it goes to HMRC, and you also risk your reputation without it. So if you just now I don't think you're eligible, can't really tell you why, and they go to someone else and they get a successful claim, successful in this context meaning not compliance checked by HMRC, not actually eligible, just to be clear. There's a lot of language that we use in this area that doesn't quite fit. So there is a lot there around reputation, around costs. Compliance checks are expensive and just a huge time sink for everyone involved to defend. So there's a big thing there, but yeah, the risk of an inquiry is higher. The risk of upsetting your client is higher. The risk of your client going to someone unscrupulous is really high, because they're still out there. Some of them have been shut down by HMRC, but they're still operating. So there's a lot you're risking if you're not wanting to say no, or putting in borderline or ineligible claims. Obviously, we would never ever think anyone's putting in an ineligible claim on purpose. But the ones that you're not sure about, that you're not 100% confident in.
And I suppose the point as well is that you may not know, you may not realise. It may be that you were highly confident that the claim has something there, but it just doesn't meet the criteria, and unless you have the right structures in place to help you understand that.
And that's where you need to be asking the same questions every time. You need some way of kind of checking that. It's easy, especially with clients that you've been working with for several years, to just not bother checking. For example, has their company structure changed? Have they had grants in this year? Are you claiming through the SME scheme or RDEC? If you haven't checked that every single time, you can come up against issues there. Have they been bought out? Have they got a new parent company that makes them a large company? So there's a lot of things that could change that make the claim not necessarily ineligible, but that make you be claiming through, you shouldn't be claiming through the SME scheme anymore, all that kind of thing. So there's a huge amount that you can get wrong, even if you're trying really hard, if you haven't got processes and structures in place. And I think it's also important. The flip side of what we do is try and highlight risk factors. So not saying that claims are ineligible, but we know from the compliance checks that have been opened over the past few years that there are things HMRC are targeting, like first time claims, like small claims, like software claims. They're looking at different sectors. They're going for, okay, this month we're going to open compliance checks into every claim that is from these sectors, that kind of thing. And that's something else that we can advise on, but it's also something you have to educate yourself on around what are HMRC looking at now, what are the risk factors, what risks am I taking? Even with the strongest claim in the world, you need to be thinking about what are the risk factors of this claim and how can I mitigate against them if a compliance check was opened. So it is a risky thing to do at the moment, but obviously it's a huge reward for clients, and we shouldn't ever be telling people not to claim if they have an eligible claim, but it's being aware of those risks is really important.
Absolutely. And so I guess then in light of the recent changes and this heightened sort of scrutiny and the impact of that, how best should advisors be approaching claim preparation?
So as we've said, structure is so important. But even before that, as I've said before, every advisor out there that's been operating for more than 6 months has pushed the boundaries. Back in the days of, as I say, no feedback from HMRC, very little pushback from HMRC, you push the boundaries for various different reasons. And you knew you could behave in a way that it was on the assumption that HMRC would not be looking at the claim in any detail. We know it. We all knew from working in this area that, yeah, it was about a 1% chance it'd be looked at. So therefore the risks were low. It encouraged a little bit of boundary pushing. Now that there's a 1 in 5 chance of HMRC asking questions, there's the additional information form. You need to be preparing your claim as if HMRC will definitely look at it. And I would obviously, if you'd asked me this question 10 years ago, I'd have said the same thing. But now it's like, there's a much higher chance that that's a true thing. And you can say this to your client, and it gives you much more power in that conversation with your client. Because clients have been claiming for years, they knew that the chances of being looked at was really low. So they were open to the risk as well, whereas clients are changing their opinion on this. There's also things you can do if you're setting up for the first time or you're getting back into this. HMRC has published a lot more guidance than they used to. There's a lot more help out there for you. So they've got things like the Guidelines for Compliance 3, so GFC 3. This really lays out in very direct terms what HMRC's expectations of you as the advisor and of your client as the claimant, what they should be doing, what process you should be going through in assessing claims, how you assess who's a competent professional, how you actually gather the costs and the technical detail, and what evidence you should be gathering to back all that up. So spending some time actually reading through everything HMRC has published, so the CIRD and all the kind of peripheral stuff that they put out is really important. You need to think about your process. And as I say, structure is so important here, because especially for repeat clients who've been claiming for years and years, who will assume still that you can get away with not being as diligent as you might have once. You just need to make sure you're asking, I will bang on about this because it's so important, but asking the same questions every time in the same level, at the same depth, and getting that information from your client. And I know from experience that getting information from a client is the hardest part of doing an R&D claim. So what you don't want to do is kind of, because you've got distracted trying to get this one piece of information out for them, miss out something else as well. Like you need, for example, we've just launched a thing in the app where we ask for the exact name of the competent professional. Even though HMRC aren't asking for that yet, it's coming. So you need to be thinking about all of that. The other thing, obviously, is looking at how you fee for this work. So obviously for years and years, contingent fees were the way that everyone did this. You took a percentage of the tax benefit from your client. What that does, and HMRC don't like it, is it does encourage bad behavior. You see all these things about, we're going to maximize your claim. We're going to make sure you get the maximum benefit. Or like anyone that's still saying that shouldn't be saying that. No one should be in the business of maximizing claims anymore. Everyone should be in the business of making them as robust and defensible as humanly possible. And maximizing it is not necessarily the way to do that. But obviously, if you're on a contingent fee, there's a huge incentive to push the boundaries as far as the costs are concerned, push the boundaries as far as the technical side is concerned, because you want as much cost as possible, so your fee is higher. And what we are seeing in the kind of current climate is a move away from that. So that was the fee there was based entirely on outcome. It was going, okay, you deserve us this money because you've had this money. And what we're seeing is a move away from that to actually, we're going to fee on the basis of the work we put in and the outputs we create, not on the outcome of the claim. So saying, right, we've spent this many hours preparing your claim, we've made sure it's robust, we've done all our due diligence, we've done all our compliance checks, and we're happy with this claim. So we're going to bill you on a fixed fee for this claim. So we're seeing about that. That seems to be definitely working in favor of moving towards robustness and compliance rather than maximal claims, which I think from the sector's point of view is a really good thing. But what this can mean, obviously, is the financial viability of some claims can be under question, because there's a huge amount more work needs put in, and some of them are really small. So it's a difficult balance. We're not sure what the answer to that is, but there's a lot to consider when you're getting into this. And education, structure, process, all incredibly important.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we've discussed many times before, haven't we, Jen, that even for those smaller claims, it's your duty as your client's sort of advisor and accountant to try and help them achieve whatever benefit that they're eligible for in those scenarios. And having, again, as you said, having these structures and processes and being efficient in how you prepare these claims using software or however else you're going to do that is going to really help
Yeah.
that. We talk about sort of a compliance first approach, using structures like software and things like that. So in practice, it protects advisors and their clients. Can you talk a little bit about what that means for an advisor, Jen, given your experience as well?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm kind of banging on about the same points, but it is around the only way to make sure every claim is compliant is to make sure that, as I say, you've gathered the right information, you've got the right evidence, that you understand the scheme as much as humanly possible. There are people out there that understand a lot better than I do, but I do my best. But you need to be keeping up with the latest changes, checking everything out, and having some structure in place so that you and anyone that does these things on your behalf, on behalf of your company, that you've got a repeatable process, because it's so easy to slip into, oh, I got that thing from them last year, I'm sure it's fine. And that these days just doesn't fly. The other thing, what we're seeing a lot of, maybe the larger advisors and accountancy firms, is actually having compliance officers. And this is something that, from my point of view, I'm surprised at, because the very first R&D consultancy I worked for had QA people that would check every claim before it went out. But it's becoming more and more common thing of having that extra pair of eyes. It's really hard to mark your own homework. It's really hard to know whether you've covered everything, whether your arguments are persuasive, whether you have missed something out. So we'd always recommend having someone in-house who can just read through everyone else's claims and just double check that. But yeah, fundamentally, everything comes from that process. Everything comes from making sure that you are doing every claim the same. Everyone else that does claims within your practice, your company, is doing them the same way, so that you know for sure that you have checked company structure every single time. You've checked for grants, you've checked the projects, you've checked ongoing projects. One way it's easy for error to creep in is to go, are you still working on that same project? Yeah, we are. Okay, great. Whereas you need to be going, are you still working on the same project and doing eligible R&D in that project? Are you actually at the tightening the bolts, polishing, painting, and doing the marketing end of that project? Or are you actually still resolving technical uncertainties? And again, that's something where, without structures and processes in place, it'd be very easy to go, I'll just copy and paste my notes from last year, because, well, if you're still doing it, it's probably the same. So forcing yourself to not be lazy, like, it's so easy to be lazy with these things, with repeat clients especially. So you've got to be thinking about, okay, if HMRC were looking at this particular claim in isolation, and they were to come back and say, that project, this one here, tell me exactly what you did in that project this year. You need to know for sure that what you wrote down is exactly what they did. Because if they open a check and, for example, you've copied and pasted from 3 years ago, or the client has said, oh yeah, it's still ongoing, just use my notes, you're going to be in trouble. So everything, as we say, is starting from the process that from the point of view that HMRC will look at it, and you have to do the same thing every time. You have to make sure it's eligible.
And even now, isn't it, Jen, with the fact that we've now, you've said this before, I always get it a bit wrong, is there going to potentially be 7 schemes to navigate once merged, now that merged in a lot to
Maybe not 7 schemes, but definitely seven
ways?
or different ways to claim. So we're looking at the moment, obviously we have SME claims, RDEC claims, R&D intensive claims, and then the mixed ones. So you've got RDEC and SME at the same time. You could potentially have RDEC and SME intensive at the same time. And then there's going to be the merge scheme and ERIS and combined ones on that basis. So there's a huge number at the moment of different ways you might be preparing a claim, and therefore different rules you need to do. So you need to know whether, can I claim for data costs for this particular claim in this year? What are the rates of relief that I can get in this year? Does this claim, can I claim R&D intensive for this one? Does it meet the criteria for this year versus this year? Because obviously the R&D intensive, for example, has a 40% R&D spend, total spend criteria, whereas under the ERIS scheme, it's a 30% ratio. So just even keeping up with what you should be claiming at any one time is really important. And again, structure and processes come into that, of making sure you know the dates of the claim, what you need to be doing, what questions you can ask for that year, what you can include for that year, everything like that. So that, yeah, there's a huge amount right now going on that affects your ability to be compliant. Even if you're doing your absolute best, you might include data costs because you've misinterpreted the rules around when that comes in, for example.
Very, very easy to, human error creeps in with in every aspect of our life, doesn't it? And it can absolutely do so. Even for the most seasoned R&D professionals,
Yeah.
there's going to be minefields out there that is hard not to miss. Great. Just quickly, I'll just jump into the app then and just give you just some examples for anyone who hasn't seen WhisperClaims yet of where we can help you to identify and mitigate risk. Let me just share my screen. As I said, for any customers that are on the session today, this will all be very familiar to you. And as I said, this will not be a demo, it's literally 2 minutes before we jump into a bit of a chat about some new aspects of technology entering the space, and how we should be thinking about that. So first thing that I just want to mention is that Jen's already talked very much about structure and process, and that's absolutely what we offer within the app here. The same set of questions that you go through every single time. Obviously, there's nuance and there's questions that you will and won't be served depending on the financial period that you're in, the type of scheme that you're going to be claiming through. The app is going to be adjusting as you go through. WhisperClaims isn't just a box filling exercise. There's a clever decision engine in the background that's guiding you through the process and identifying all of these things that I'm talking about. The first thing I'll just quickly show you here is our qualification checks. So every time you start a new claim, you are asked to go through a series of qualification checks that are just identifying, Jen's mentioned some of the questions, this being the first one here, identifying if your client meets the very minimum criteria to enable you to move forward within the claim. Within our qualification check section, as well as identifying whether they are actually a UK limited company and can therefore claim, we're going to be asking you things like questions around pre-notification. So a very straightforward question to identify if pre-notification was required in this instance, and if the form has been submitted within the deadline. For claimants who are claiming for the first time and those who've not submitted within the last 3 accounting periods, there is some nuance there. If they haven't pre-notified, you're going to see that we're going to stop you in your tracks. You can't move forward within the app. Your session will be ended. The idea being that, as Jen's already said, we do not want you or your client spending time and effort and resources in preparing a claim, which does suck up all of those things very much so, if you don't meet the criteria. So we want to make sure that we're highlighting things like that for you. Jen's already touched on this as well. Something else that I think would be quite nice to show you is we've got a new competent professional section here where we're asking about the competent professionals that are working on these innovative projects that you're talking and discussing with your clients. We want to get some information about what type of professional they are. Are they an employee of the company? Are they EPW? Are they a subcontractor? Do they have qualifications? How many years experience? And also giving you the opportunity to put in some details about their qualifications and experience and anything else you want to talk about. This is something, as Jen's already said, is not mandatory from HMRC's perspective just now, but it's definitely something that we've been getting feedback from our clients about, and in some inquiry situations that we've heard about, it's information HMRC has been asking about, so why not offer it straight away. I can't show you on here, but because I've got some competent professionals in and I'd have to wipe the tables, but if we were to suggest that there were no competent professionals, again, this would be an end point and the app would end your session, because as Jen's already said, no matter how eligible a project is, without competent professionals to be able to point to, your claim is not viable. Further down in the process, we help you manage the additional information form. So we ask questions about how many projects there are, project titles, and then later on downstream, we're going to be able to show you how to assess project spend, so you can include information about the most viable projects that meet the AIS criteria. Before I show you that, again, Jen has touched on this, and I've just mentioned about how the app flexes depending on the financial period you're in. We're only going to be serving you questions within the app that are relevant to the accounting period you're working in. This is a post-April 2023 claim here. You can see I've got up on the screen. If this was a pre-April 2023 claim, you would not see these 2 fields, these 2 cost fields for cloud computing and data licensing, because pre-1st of April 2023, these expenses are not eligible to be included in an R&D tax claim, but post-April 2023, 1st of April 2023, they are. So again, it's just small details like this that can be easily forgotten if you're working on several claims in a day, different accounting periods. Having structures and processes in place like WhisperClaims can help enable you to stay on top of everything and make sure that you're not missing anything, but also you're not including anything that shouldn't be included. Let me quickly jump to the technical detail section. So the last bit of the app, a couple of things that I just want to show you here very quickly. Once you've collated all of the costs, the app presents you with a table, as you can see in front of you here, allowing you to easily assess how expenditure has been distributed across all of the projects that have been included in this claim. So you can now decide, based on HMRC's criteria for the additional information form, which projects you want to include in more detail. We've got risk checkers here in the background to make sure that you select the minimum number of projects, so you're not selecting not enough, but you also don't have to write up every single project either. I'll just quickly show you how that happens. So HMRC expects 50% of the overall spend in this scenario. If I try and only include 2 projects, you can see that the app won't let me move forward to start writing up my projects because I need to include a 3rd one there. And then finally, in the projects details section here, where I am writing up my individual project descriptions, I'll just give you a quick look at how the templates look. So this is templates enabling you to easily articulate the various sections within the AIF form about the project detail. If I haven't included all of the information in each of my project descriptions, you're going to see that, again, I can't move forward to the next part of the process. And that's because one of my tabs here is missing some information. And when I go in and include that information here, all of my tabs go green, my button reappears, and I can now move forward into the next part of the process. The last bit I'm going to show you is just our review sections and our claim review service. So reviewing all of the information that you have, enabling you to see the information in one place. We've got a review screen that gives you an opportunity to double check all of the details, make sure that everything looks correct, dot all your I's, cross all your T's before proceeding here. We also have in WhisperClaims in-app risk assessments. So over on your right-hand side here, you can see we've got an automated risk review. It's not an eligibility checker. Again, this is something that Jen highlighted earlier on. Our in-app risk assessment is just here to help you understand if there are any potential areas of your claim that may pique HMRC's interest. So she's mentioned things like SIC codes already. So if the claim is in an area that HMRC wouldn't usually consider eligible, have you made sure that the SIC code is up to date? You know, if you've had a company that's been going for a very long time and maybe they've pivoted into something else that is now an eligible sector, but they've still got an old SIC code sitting at company's house, you know, does that need to be looked at? We look at things like expenditure versus turnover. We look at things like if grants are present. So all of the things that could cause potentially complexities within the claim, we're going to take all of that information and give you an overall assessment. The assessment is based on a low, medium or high score. And that's something that if any of our customers who are working within the app want to chat to us about, we can definitely expand on and go over that with you. And then very finally, as a WhisperClaims customer, when you go through to finalise your claim, we also offer some additional options to engage with deeper services, such as our claim review service. So if you maybe don't have somebody, as Jen suggested, within your team who can review claims in isolation, and you want us to have a look at your claims for you, you can engage with our claim review service here, which is a deep dive desk-based review looking at all of the publicly available information about the company, assessing project descriptions, analysing costs, and essentially overall claim coherence, which we'll give you as feedback, which you can then take, review internally, and then have some deeper discussions with your client if anything needs adjusting, or if anything, I suppose the flip side of that is just giving you confidence that you've got a strong claim there to move forward for submission. So those are just the little bits that I wanted to show you within the app, just to show you how WhisperClaims can help you with this compliant first framework and approach. Before we go into Q&A, we thought it would be quite nice just to have a quick chat about some of the advances that are going on in the sector just now in terms of R&D tax software. AI is a huge topic, and any customers that are on today will know that we've been talking a lot in some sort of focus group sessions about their opinions about AI, because it's something that we've been considering for a very long time as to how it may be able to enhance efficiency within the app. So Jen, back to you again. Where do you see this balance between technology and human expertise when it comes to preparing R&D tax claims, and maybe background about what we're looking to do as well?
Yeah, so I think obviously, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head there, Suze, there has to be a balance. There are tools out there that you upload your notes and it will spit out a report that sounds very convincing. And they're really, really powerful tools. I'm not disparaging them in any way, but the problem we have there is rubbish in, rubbish out, essentially. If you don't understand the legislation, you don't know the rules, you don't know what HMRC are looking for, having something beautifully written that sounds eligible, but you've got no way of knowing whether it is or not, that's really dangerous. That's when we get back to the days of people just throwing in any old claim because you can make it sound convincing and HMRC might not look at it. So I think there is a big danger with this if it falls into the wrong hands. It falls people who don't understand the legislation, don't understand the scheme. AI is just a sticking plaster. It just means that you can produce really good, really convincing sounding pieces of documentation. So you need to first of all be able to, it doesn't take away the need to be able to assess your clients' projects critically, to think about whether they're eligible, to think about whether they meet both the direct and indirect criteria. So you need to know that they have a baseline that makes sense, an advance, an uncertainty, and a resolution. But you also need to make sure, as we talked about, that there were competent professionals involved, that the costs are the right kind of costs, that the structure of how they did that work means they are allowed to claim for it versus the company that actually did it. So there's so much going on there that you need to understand and be able to analyze. And if you can do that, then these tools are amazing because they do cut out some of the time it takes. But you still have to, you've got to have done that. You've got to have robust notes. You've got to have done your research. And then you've got to be able to look at whatever comes out of these tools and say whether or not, first of all, it's true. Which I think I know is getting better and people are managing to overcome the issue about hallucinations within these kind of software systems. But you've got to also be able to say whether, okay, the way that is written is accurate to what I put in, and that kind of thing. So there's a huge amount of work still needed around these AI tools, even if you are happy to use AI. I mean, a lot of people within, especially the accounting sector, are quite skeptical about these tools. The other thing, and I think this is something you can comment on a wee bit more, Suze, is around the kind of similarities between lots of different AI produced content.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know like we utilize AI not within the app, just with it in other areas of the business, such as, you know, marketing and things like that. It's fantastic for from an efficiency point of view, and also thought-provoking, things like that, because the way that we use it is, you know, taking a step back and critically analyzing what it spits out, and then making sure that it's something that is usable for us. I know certainly I recognize, you know, repeated words, repeated tones, you know, content that just looks very similar. And I suppose what you want to be careful about, particularly in this context of R&D tax claims preparation, is not having reports that are going to end up sounding and looking the same in similar contexts, maybe similar sectors, things like that. Because the last thing you want is for somebody at HMRC's end to, you know, maybe recognize something as looking a little bit like it's maybe been prepared using AI, and then making an assumption that you maybe haven't done your due diligence as an advisor at that end, and then flagging something for an inquiry. So there's so many well, there's pitfalls, but there's so many fantastic examples of how this can be a really powerful tool to help, and for good.
Yeah.
I guess we're still at that quite early stage, aren't we?
Yeah, and I think it's something that what we are looking at implementing within the software is things like AI for baseline research. So that doesn't go directly into the end reports, it doesn't go into the AIF, but what it does do, and from what the feedback we've had from clients, is that cuts down the time a huge amount if you can just upload your notes to something and it will come back with, okay, here's all the companies that say they're doing similar things, here's the information that's available publicly, and you can then go, okay, if I compare my client's work to what's going on here, why is my client's work different? How can I argue that what they're doing is advancing science if someone else is already doing it? Or it gives you something to refute, because in the end, the first thing HMRC do when they open a compliance check is Google the work and look at who else is doing similar things. So it's doing that part for you. Very, very helpful. AI is also very good at just essentially comparing the content you've put into a set of criteria. So saying you need to discuss in advance, none of what you've said discusses the advance in science and technology. Okay, you need to go away and think about this and maybe add some more detail. So even now, there are tools that I think are really helpful to people preparing R&D claims. And as you say, it's just going into it with your eyes open around, I suppose, the limitations of the software, the limitations of people, and how you can bring those two together to reduce those limitations on both sides. And I think that's going to be the important thing. The other thing to note, obviously, is we know HMRC have been out there looking for both AI systems to help them assess claims and AI systems to help them detect AI produced claims. So, what I think one of the hesitations within the sector is, do we want to end up in an arms race with HMRC where we're producing AI that produces claims, HMRC are then detecting and automatically rejecting them, and then you get into trying to produce more sophisticated AI to get around that. So there's a lot there that needs to be thought about. And I think AI is inevitable, I think, for anybody in any sector. And it's about using it in the way that enhances what you're doing rather than replaces it as a person. I think you can never really replace a human's kind of critical thinking abilities within this. And so using it for grunt work like research is excellent. Using it to write things, maybe less so.
Yeah, no, that's really important. I'm aware of time, and I know we've got an offer to talk about. So Jen, just to summarise, for advisors that are new maybe to R&D tax, or looking to expand their service now, what's the one single most important thing that they should focus on right now when it comes to operating in the R&D tax space?
And number one thing is get out there and educate yourself. However that is, I think bringing in a software system like WhisperClaims is incredibly important, but we will always argue that WhisperClaims is a tool that enhances your own knowledge. It doesn't replace it. And as AI comes in, again, AI does not replace the need for knowledge. So getting out there, educating yourself, reading through everything HMRC has got, and then working out what the best way for you to prepare claims, whether that's with software or not, is absolutely key. But just learn, learn and learn and learn.
And I think that's one thing as well. We talk about this a lot, don't we, internally, Jen, is when you're using software like WhisperClaims, you're on a constant learning curve. You're never going to walk away from being a WhisperClaims customer and not knowing more than what you knew before, because the app's going to help you, and all the support and resources that we offer around the app is there to help you build those skills and that knowledge, because nobody can just do the theory and expect to jump into it, can they?
Yeah,
It's continuous, continuous.
absolutely.
Yeah. So Jen, if you wouldn't mind if I can ask you to share the screen again very quickly. We do have a really exciting onboarding package to offer to anybody who might be interested. And if anybody wants to talk about this afterwards, please do give us a shout. While I'm explaining this, if you do have any questions about anything we've spoken about today, please do drop in the Q&A. You've all been a bit quiet today. Hopefully that means we've just given you lots to think about. But if you've got any questions, just do give us a shout. And while Jen's bringing up the screen, I'm just going to share in the chat a link to our webpage about what I'm just going to tell you about just now.
I can now. I'm going to be able to share. It is coming. Sorry.
Basically, whether you're looking to expand into R&D services or you're seeking ways to make your existing processes more efficient and cost effective, we've got what is essentially a limited time offer designed to support these goals, as Jen's sharing on the screen just now. So available until the 1st of March, we've got a new onboarding package that's going to equip your firm with tools, training and expert support to help you reduce risk and deliver robust and compliant claims confidently. So what we're offering is essentially up to the value of even more actually, so in some cases £1,700 worth of onboarding resources, and we've just given you a snapshot here as to how you can take advantage of those. So in your first month, it's our trial offer of access to WhisperClaims software, a free claim download and a free expert claim review. In month 2, you can take advantage of our fundamentals of training course, and you also get access to our friends over at the R&D Communities learning platform from month 2. And then in month 3, there's other options for you to engage with, so our portfolio review and also access to our Smart Save promotion for our pricing. You can get a link to our pricing page. I'll share that for you in just a moment as well. So this is just essentially a really kind of comprehensive package of everything that you might need to really hit the ground running, and just taking into account all of the things that we've been talking about today and all the things that you need to be thinking about when delivering a really robust and compliant service. So if anybody's interested in that, as I said, I've shared the link in the chat, so do give us a shout. I think we've got some questions. I've got one here. Hi, Christian, how you doing? Hypothetical question. Just been listening, really, although given the government's current push for AI based on the news this week, I assume there will be changes in the legislation to encompass this in the next few years.
That's a really interesting question that I hadn't at all thought about. I mean, in terms of the legislation, and who knows, but at the budget, the government did say they had no intention of changing anything to do with R&D tax relief within this current parliament. So we were all hoping, I think anyone that's been through the last few years in R&D tax relief was feeling, breathed out a little bit for the first time in a while, and was quite relieved that we're not going to see any changes. I wouldn't be surprised if the government slash HMRC did impose some kind of rules around AI generated content in terms of any kind of tax schemes. The last thing they want is people just pushing a button and claiming every type of tax relief they can and overwhelming the systems. I also wouldn't be surprised if they started looking for it themselves. Obviously, to be able to, it's a wee bit interesting because with all the legislation, as anyone knows, the legislation within tax leaves a lot of scope for HMRC to make its own rules. So the legislation is very basic, and then it's up to HMRC how they want to enforce this. So I think even without changes in legislation, HMRC could quite easily say we just don't accept AI produced claims. It would seem a little bit strange, given, as you say, what the government said this week about wanting to be an AI powerhouse, if we were then rejecting certain kinds of AI produced content. Yeah, so I don't know if it would ever be legislated against, but I wouldn't be surprised if HMRC at least published guidance, if not rules, around the use of AI in, as I say, all areas of tax, not just R&D tax relief. But it is going to be interesting to see how the government's push for AI and the use of AI, and generally business as a whole, the use of AI and bringing it in, how that is then how HMRC react to that, because it is going to come in all over. You're going to have AI tools for doing tax comps and filling out CT600s and assessing people's accounts and all that kind of thing. There's going to be a huge amount of AI being used over the next few years. So how they then react to that is anyone's guess at the moment, I think.
Yeah, it's hard as well, isn't it? Because there's tools out there now that enable you to humanize the AI. So it's already evolving at speed. And yeah, how HMRC, which is not known for its proactive in certain areas of technology, is.
For example, you couldn't claim for cloud computing costs in an R&D claim until last year, when we set up our company nearly 8 years ago and everything was cloud-based then. They don't react quickly to new technologies and new developments. So how they're going to manage to keep up is also another question around, as we know, just the processes of new software systems within governmental organizations is so slow. How they're going to react to the fast pace of AI is, again, a really interesting thing to think about.
That's a great question. Well, hopefully that's everything covered. And if anyone does have any more questions while I'm gassing on a bit, just please do feel free to drop it in the notes. But as we've said already, if anybody's got any questions about anything we've covered today, we hope it's been useful, by the way. Please do feel free to drop me a message or get in touch via the website. If anybody who's not already a customer would like to see a fuller demo and understand a bit more about how we're supporting our accountants and advisors across the UK with our R&D tax claims service, then please do get in touch, and I'll be really happy to organise that with you. We will be sending out a recording of today's session. That will probably be tomorrow now, once the video has been edited. So do look out for that in your inbox if you do want to watch back or take some notes. Thank you to everybody for joining us today. We hope you will have a great rest of your week, and we will hopefully see you on the next session. Thanks, Jem. Take care, everyone.